Hi guys, it is Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the 25 signs that you have grown up or possibly grown up under a psychologically and emotionally sick or unstable parent. You know, this is a topic that a lot of you have asked me to focus on. And as a matter of fact, I've talked about some of the consequences of growing up with an unstable parent in previous videos. And I'm actually going to post that above us and at the end of the video as we go through this video. So stay tuned for the end of the video where you're going to see some of those videos where I talked about unstable parents. This is something that a lot of you have experienced, and you know, it's something that I see a lot of in my practice. There are situations where the parents bring the kids in for psychiatric treatment, and sadly, they themselves can sometimes need the support more so than the children. And that's certainly not a put down. It actually just says that the parent is the leader, and if they are not well, then they can't raise, protect, or really support the child growing under them. So this video is going to talk about those 25 signs that you may have grown up with a psychologically and emotionally unstable parent. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed, thank you so much. And for those who are new to the channel, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can stick around with us and, you know, be a part of this growing community. The other day I posted a video on, you know, some of the changes and the improvements that I'm going to be making on the channel as we go along. So you're going to see some different things. You're probably going to see some different scenery every now and then. You're probably going to see more vlogs. And if you go ahead and look at that video that I posted yesterday on Tuesday, you're going to see and you're going to hear a little bit more about some of the improvements. So I encourage you to go ahead and subscribe and then check out that video. The benefits for you in today's video is that I'm going to talk about the 25 signs, and I'm going to break them down and define them that you have possibly grown up under a psychologically or emotionally unstable parent. So what do I mean when I say a psychologically or emotionally unstable parent? Well, what I mean is the parent did not have the capacity to treat you the way that they should have, or to give you the kind of support and nurturing and validation that you needed. An emotionally or psychologically unstable parent also has behaviors that are unpredictable. They're invalidating, they're confusing, they're emotionally and psychologically triggering, right? They have these kind of behaviors and these thought patterns and these emotions that are really stormy, for lack of a better word. They're very stormy. They're very fluctuating, right? They're like a roller coaster. You can't keep up. Now, there are good parents who are loving and caring, and yet they're struggling emotionally and mentally, and they can't help it. That's one set of parents. But then we also have another group of parents who are unstable, and they are callous. They are inflexible, so they are rigid. They are very disorganized and not very focused and centered. They are confusing and haphazard. They do things backwards. They do things inappropriately. These kind of parents may or may not love their kids. And these kind of parents may or may not intentionally be detrimental. But in today's video, I'm going to be talking about those parents who are detrimental, whether they intentionally are or not. Whether, their intent is to be good parents or their intent is not to be a parent, really doesn't matter for this video. What matters is that they are unstable and that they haven't been able to meet you where you needed to be met as a child or as an individual. When you grow up under an emotionally and psychologically unstable parent, then you end up developing behaviors and signs and symptoms and characteristics as an adult that interferes with healthy relationships, healthy mindsets, right? Healthy life patterns, healthy, spirituality. There's 4 domains I think that a healthy parent needs to be full in order to function as a parent. And the first is emotional and psychological. If you don't have that domain managed appropriately, then you're not going to be the kind of parent that you need to be. The other domain is physiological. So if there's medical conditions, if there's somatoform disorders, right? So like where the body hurts and there's constant aches and pains that can't be explained. When there's physiological things going on, it's really hard for that parent to be an actual parent, to be present, to be engaged, to be involved. The other thing is financial. If a parent is constantly working or out of the home, or they are, hiring various babysitters to do their job, then you can't really bond with that parent, right? And if that domain isn't properly managed, then that's an issue. And then the last domain, the fourth domain, is spiritual. Parents who are just emotionally and psychologically detached from their kid are going to be unhealthy parents. I just think that there's a spiritual element to being a mom, being a dad. And if you're not fulfilling that domain, if you're not, meeting your child emotionally and spiritually, then that's a problem. So, when those four domains are out of whack, for lack of a clinical term, then we have a problem. So, let me just go ahead and jump into it. I think you guys are interested in hearing what I have to say regarding this. And, this is basically a list determined by research and also determined by my own practice and what I've seen over my 12-year career. Okay, so let's just start with number one. So the number one sign that you have grown up under an emotionally and psychologically unstable parent is unpredictability and layability. Unpredictability. You don't know what they're going to do from 1 minute to the next. The layability. They are calm 1 minute, upset the next. Happy 1 minute, depressed the next. Irritable 1 minute, pleasant the next. You don't know what to expect. Your relationship is like a cycle. It's like a roller coaster, and it's unpredictable. You don't know what to expect. And growing up under a parent that has unpredictable and labile behaviors and emotions and even thoughts, that can really be frightening. It can also be traumatic, because here's what happens usually, and this is what I've seen in my practice over the years. A child looks to the parent for not only confirmation but validation, and without confirmation and without validation, you have a situation where your perception of the world, your perception of yourself and your life really does kind of get confused, and it gets skewed because you don't have that experienced adult or that experienced parent to say, here's how you should perceive this, here's how you should handle this, here's how maybe that other person meant this. So what do? You draw your own conclusions, and because you're a child or you're inexperienced, your conclusions are short-sighted. Your conclusions may be false as well, or skewed. And so you don't have a parent that can help you make sense out of what's going on with you and in your world. And so you arrive at conclusions that are inadequate or that are short-sighted, and you don't have the ability to bounce ideas off of somebody who knows a little bit more than you do. So you remain confused, you remain inhibited. Some kids isolate, they withdraw, right? They just drop out of things because they don't know how to manage them. They don't know how to see them. So having an unpredictable and labile parent adds to that, because you may have the parent present with you for one moment and then absolutely absent and not present the next. And so that keeps you confused, and that keeps you feeling like you're the one who's unpredictable and labile. And that is not healthy. All right. So that's category number one. The next is substance abuse. Okay. Substance abuse, alcohol dependency, having a parent, that drinks a beer here and there, drinks some wine here and there, maybe drinks a vodka once every 2 years. Fine. I think that's a little bit okay. I think that's normal based on culture and, based on some family rules, and based on style and so forth. There's a lot of culture involved in that. All right. So, all right, you want to do that, you choose to do that, fine. But here's where the problem comes in. It's when that parent relies on the drugs and the alcohol to help them make it from one day to the next, or to help reduce their stress level, or to, help them manage their own emotions or their own chaotic feelings on the inside. So substance abuse and alcohol dependency could really be a problem. It not only creates an unpredictable and unstable parent, because alcohol, as you know, if it's drank in excess, it can really change how that parent sees you and sees the world and sees themselves and reacts. Some people feel like it makes them calm, but the reality of that is that not always. There are some parents who act really, really insane when they drink too much alcohol. So what happens in a situation like this, if it's excessive or the drinking is out of control, the individual really does have an inability, to control their own emotions and to control the way that their mind operates. Alcohol in excess can also cause certain mental health disorders to worsen. So bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, for example, sometimes depression, right? Sometimes suicidal thoughts worsen because there's no ability to inhibit or to pull oneself back or pump the brakes, because the alcohol kind of loosens you up a little bit. So, substance abuse and drug dependency can really be a challenge, and it can really create an unstable parent. So that's number two. The next one, and I actually have my list here because it's so many, so I'm going to use this to kind of guide me. The next is depression or dysthymia. And what I mean by that is a depression that is long-term, and it's really chronic, and it's recurrent, and it never goes away. It never decreases. It stays at the same level for long periods of time. Depression and dysthymia, untreated, it can cause a loop. And what I mean by a loop is the depression or the long grade chronic depression can lead to alcohol use, and that alcohol use can lead to unpredictability and liability. And that unpredictability and liability, if your parent is aware of it, can then lead them back around to try medication and drugs because they want to medicate, they want to be better, but they don't know how. So it causes a loop. I hope you can see that. It causes a little bit of a loop. It's a bad cycle. So depression and dysthymia. All right. The next one is suicidal thoughts, urges, and threats. Parents who engage in using suicidal thoughts, threats, or gestures to manipulate, that's a problem. Parents who are just so depressed that they want the pain to stop and suicide is the only thing they can think of, that's still a problem. Children do not need to know, they do not need to witness that their parent is suicidal and feeling like life is not worth them living. If that's something that the parent is going to deal with on their own, fine. But for a child to hear that, or see that, or be threatened with it, that's a problem. It's just 100% simply dysfunctional, and it should not be occurring, okay? You also don't want something like suicide contagion to be a part of the issue. And I talk a lot about this in my book on suicide that I did 2 years ago. But suicide contagion can occur. The child growing up under this sick parent or unstable parent can actually become suicidal themselves just because they've witnessed the only person that they trust, the parent, talking about it. And so that's a problem. All right. The next one is self-injurious behaviors. And we're talking cutting and risk-taking and, burning oneself and really doing things to harm oneself. A child should not see their parent cutting, burning themselves, engaging in risky behaviors, or really being very careless and risky. A parent should not be doing that in front of a child, okay? The next is a parent who has delusions, and primarily delusions of grandeur and persecution. A parent who has delusions, and I talk a lot about delusions in this video up here. A parent that has delusions is often emotionally and psychologically unstable, because what happens is they begin to buy into that delusion so much so that it becomes an issue in terms of how they feel about themselves and the world. And so they may isolate, they may withdraw, they may get depressed, they may get anxious, they may start going to alcohol to calm the delusion. And so when that happens, they're actually creating more of a problem, more of a mental illness, and more of a substance abuse issue. And so the child observes this parent who's like really unstable, really unpredictable, and really delusional. The child may begin to see the parent as living in their own world. And so that creates isolation, withdrawal, depression, and anxiety on the child's part. So a parent who has delusions of persecution and grandeur, or any other kind of delusion, can be really, really difficult. Now, delusions of persecution is that everybody is against you and everybody's out to get you. And delusions of grandeur is that you're actually on the level of God, that you can fly, you're invincible. And so a parent that has those delusions can really come across as narcissistic and arrogant, and sometimes sociopathic. And it can really, really regress you as the child into a place that's not healthy. All right, so delusions. The next is thought disturbance. And what I mean by thought disturbance is the parent is not really able to have clear logical thinking abilities. Their thoughts are very skewed and all over the place. The thoughts are also very incorrect. They may seem really idiosyncratic or really odd or weird or strange or magical, right? It may seem really, the thoughts may seem really psychotic. The thought disturbance is an actual disturbance. Okay, that's my point with this, that, the disturbance of thought is so clear that the child recognizes something is really wrong here and my mom or dad needs help, or my guardian. Okay, the next that I have is experience of traumatic bonding. If you're traumatically bonded to your parent, that's a problem. You're not bonded emotionally and psychologically in a healthy way because you love your parent. You're actually bonded to them out of bondage. Okay, and the whole idea behind this video, I talk about it up here, the whole idea behind traumatic bonding is that the parent is abusive to you. The parent is unhealthy and unhelpful. And so because you love that parent, and because you're confused, and you're stuck between the good side of them and the bad side of them, you become bonded to them, and you become manipulated by them, and you become imprisoned by them. And so You bond to them in such a way that you neglect yourself, you neglect your own emotional and psychological health to a point of trauma. And so if you're traumatically bonded to that unstable parent, that's a problem. All right, so that's sign number 8. That's sign number 8, that you may have grown up under a parent that's unstable. Okay, traumatic bonding does not happen in healthy families. It happens in dysfunctional, unstable families. The next one is hallucinations. Now, hallucinations can be visual, it can be auditory, it could be olfactory, the nose, it can be gustatory, taste, and it can also be sensational. Hallucinations, hearing, seeing things, smelling things that aren't there, tasting things that aren't there, can really become a problem. So let's say, for example, you have a parent that's really narcissistic and sociopathic. They may come up with this whole delusional theory that you're actually poisoning their food, because every time you fix them something, it tastes bad. It tastes bad. And so there we go with the gustatory hallucination. And they may say, okay, but I'm also smelling something in my food that's not right. And there we go with the olfactory hallucination, and then they may start saying things like they saw you put something in their food. And there we go with the visual hallucination. And so I have actually treated cases where hallucinations really broke a family apart. It split them because that person was seeing and hearing and tasting and smelling things that just weren't there. It just wasn't happening. But they had this strong belief, this strong delusion that their hallucinations were true. So that's sign number, I think it was sign number 9, that you may have grown up under a psychologically unhealthy parent, a parent who does those kind of things and has those delusions and hallucinations. That's a problem. Okay, the next is what's called inappropriate compensatory behaviors. You're kind of using something to satisfy something. You're using something else to satisfy something, a drug addiction, a sexual habit, an emotional pattern that makes you feel good about you, whatever. Any parent that has patterns that are inappropriate and unhelpful, that's a problem if they continue it. The pattern of unhelpful and unstable behavior is a problem, okay? The next thing is brief psychosis. And brief psychosis is really a diagnosis that lasts for 6 months or less. Sometimes longer, it just depends. But the brief psychosis occurs in a brief period of time and then it dissipates, it goes away. Well, a parent who is psychotic for a brief period of time may actually have anger management issues. They may snap, right? They may be explosive. They may be dramatic and abusive to you. They may also have hallucinations and delusions in addition to their psychosis, right? In addition to really being quote unquote crazy, as I have heard some of my families describe their parents. My mom was crazy when I was growing up. So brief psychotic disorder or brief psychosis can also be a problem. The next thing is intermittent explosivity or explosive disorder, or long-term violence. Parents who have this, periodic temperament where they are periodically explosive and abusive and demanding and dominating, that's a problem. A parent who curses you out and yells at you and screams at you and threatens you and intimidates you, these are all problems, and these are all signs of an unstable parent. Whether they're a bully or they're psychiatrically or emotionally unstable, whatever the case, they're unstable and they need help. Okay, so that intermittent explosive behavior, it doesn't occur consecutively, or it doesn't occur often, but it's intermittent. It occurs every now and then. That is a problem, okay? The next is hypomania or mania. A parent who is hypomanic may be really, really hyper and like really, really good and positive and encouraging to you and inspiring and passionate and, really desirable as a parent. And then the next minute they're back down to being really depressed and isolating and withdrawing and irritable and mean and crabby and that back and forth unpredictability, as I called it at the very beginning of the video, can really throw you off growing up under somebody like that. You can't stay under a person who is like that. I think if you have a hypomanic parent where they get somewhat manic, that's okay. You can kind of manage that because they're not that far high. But if you have a parent who's manic, okay, and they're like way up here, invincible, delusions of grandeur, and like positive and loving and wonderful and supportive and invalidating, they do everything you need them to do as a parent in their manic stage. When they hit the ground and they're depressed, and you feel it growing up under them, right? Because you feel the detachment, you feel the isolation, you feel the irritability, you feel the abuse, you feel, the negative ways that they are towards you. That can be very, very emotionally traumatizing for you, because again, it's unpredictable and it's labile. You can't hold on to a parent who switches every minute you look at them, right? Or every minute you look to them for parental support. It just doesn't work that way. The next one is opioid use disorder, or a problematic pattern of use of opioids. You know, again, let's go back to that substance abuse. A parent who is addicted to pills, addicted to opioids, addicted to narcotics, addicted to prescription drugs or alcohol or marijuana or whatever, you know, it's not going to be a healthy environment growing up, because drugs alter the brain. Drugs alter who we are. That's why some people are firmly against medication. It alters you, whether that's in a good or a bad way. And some people rather not be altered. They want to be who they are. So, you know, someone who's abusing opioids, they need help. Someone who's abusing narcotics, they need help. So that's a problem. So if you have a parent that's been addicted to drugs, addicted to pills, addicted to alcohol, addicted to narcotics, that's a problem. All right. The next is dissociative disorders. An individual who dissociates, right? They kind of pull away from reality. Here's reality, and they pull away from it and they go operate in their own world. That's a problem, because the child can't keep up with the behavioral patterns of that dissociative parent. You know, think about somebody that has dissociative amnesia. And we talked about that in this video up here last week or the week before that. Dissociative amnesia means that you're going to forget, you know, who you are and where you are and what happened. You may even forget that you even have a child. So it can really get traumatic for the child trying to understand the parent who's dissociating, and dissociating in a way where they look like they have amnesia. So that can be a problem as well. And having a parent that has multiple personality disorders, I'm not too sure on the research on that. I have seen some videos and some research that says that they are also good parents when they are getting treatment and staying under treatment and really staying in contact with who they are. But I'm sure there are some situations, because life isn't perfect, where the parent with multiple personality disorder, or better known as dissociative identity disorder, switches into a different personality. That child has to learn to adjust. Like, who is this? Okay, this is Mike now and not Kelly. And so, you know, things get a little bit more complicated when a parent is dissociating or has DID. So that's also an issue. All right, that's a sign you may have had an unstable parent that you grew up under. The next is obsessive compulsive behavior. So parents who are obsessive and compulsive and, you know, really fixated on one thing for long periods of time, that's a problem. I used to treat a family where the mother had trichotillomania, and that's obsessive hair pulling. And it really is an impulse control disorder in the DSM. It's called an impulse control disorder. And the whole idea behind trichotillomania, oh my goodness, I got tongue-tied. Trichotillomania, the whole idea behind that is, you know, the individual cannot control their impulses. So they're constantly picking their eyelashes and their eyebrows and maybe snatching out their own hair. You know, I used to have a dad who would just pull out his eyelashes, and he physically looked different to his kids, and that was traumatic. That was traumatic for the kids. They didn't want to see dad like that. So trichotillomania, you can't say that fast. There's like no way. That can be an issue. All right. The next is preoccupation with a physical defect, and really that's called body dysmorphic disorder. You know, really thinking that the nose is the nose is curved and uneven, thinking that this eye is shorter or smaller than the other, thinking that this ear is bigger than the other, or it's curved up while this ear isn't. You know, those kind of parents can really express themselves at home in a way that impacts the child's self-esteem, because now the child may begin to learn how to critique themselves in that very same way. And so self-esteem is targeted. Emotional stability is also targeted, because the child has to watch the parent suffer with what they believe is a physiological defect or a physical defect. And so that's not healthy either. So growing up under a parent who's this way and has exposed, you know, you to this, that's a problem. All right. The next is disorganized speech or coherent speech. Parents who are psychotic or unstable in some fashion, they have a disorganized way that they talk. Sometimes they, you know, talk in riddles, or the tone of their voice is a little bit robotic and odd, or, you know, sometimes they really are not making sense. They're incoherent. Those kind of parents are really hard to live with. and really hard to deal with, because you're going to deal with embarrassment. You don't want your parent talking to your school or your peers, or you may struggle with confusion because you don't understand what your parent is trying to say. And so disorganized speech and incoherent speech can actually come about with a parent who's psychotic or experiencing a psychosis, I should say. Okay, the next is catatonic or disorganized behavior. And catatonic behavior is when the individual either can't talk, they can't get out what they're trying to say. It's almost like a severe form of stuttering, or they just can't say anything at all, like selective mutism almost. I'm going to put a definition over here. That's not a disorder for adults. That's usually for kids. But catatonia is sort of similar to that, in the sense that there's no words coming out, like there's nothing happening, or that parent may have catatonia where the body just kind of does like this odd posture and it like stays this way for a long period of time. That's like really hard to conceptualize if you're a child, if the body is like this for long periods of time. Okay, there have been reports of historical cases of catatonia where people have stayed in sitting postures and their body has been twisted and they've stayed that way for like months. So that can get pretty serious. The next is periods of mood episodes with psychosis. So periods of being moody with psychosis, and then periods of having some lucid kind of, thoughts and behaviors. You're kind of like, you're functioning normally and things are clear to you. That alternating with periods of irritability and psychosis, that's really difficult to keep up with if you had a parent like this as well. How can you keep up with somebody if they're constantly changing in who they are? So having periods of moodiness and psychosis with periods of being lucid and clear-minded and normal, that's really hard. There's like a grieving period that happens for most kids growing up under these kind of parents. They love the parent, they want to be there with the parent, but they just can't understand why their parent switches. They just can't understand why their parent cannot stay the course. Why can't you just be firm and consistent and stay where you're at? That can be traumatizing. The next is diminished range of emotional expression. So a parent whose face you can't read, a parent whose reactions you can't really interpret, that's psychologically detrimental as well, because this may be a situation, or you may have a situation, I should say, where you need to be able to interpret your parents' reactions or emotions. You need to be able to look at their face and their affect is what we call it, and interpret what they're feeling or what they're thinking. And if you can't do that, you're going to go through a lot of confusion over the years and growing up under such a parent. So this is another sign. The next is suicidal ideation just to manipulate. To me, that's an unstable parent when you have suicidal ideation that you're using to manipulate. And we're talking about a parent who is not really experiencing suicidal thoughts, but they throw it up as a means to manipulate, as a means to make you afraid, to keep you thrown off and confused. Those kind of parents really are unstable. They don't care about the impact that they have on the child with how they're behaving and portraying themselves. They do it because they get some kind of value out of it. It's a bully, really. Something is very wrong with that kind of a parent. Either they lack the emotional attention they needed growing up, or they just aren't ready to be parents. Okay? The next one, before we get to the final one, is a parent who has stormy relationships. They self-harm, they're suicidal, they have dysphoria, which is like this long-term period of like moodiness and depression. And they also are toxic in how they relate to other people within the environment, right? They pit people against each other. They triangulate, they really keep things in a cycle, and they keep trouble going. That having a parent like that requires you as the child, whether that's a child, a teen, or an adult child, it really keeps you having to run to their rescue and balance things and save them from situations where they could have gotten in trouble or lost things. That's really unstable for a child to grow up under, having to manage a parent like that who's toxic and triangulating and unstable. That's a problem. And last but not least is the parent who's very egocentric and arrogant and doesn't see the error of their ways. They're a bully, they're narcissistic, right? They want all the attention for themselves. They really do use you for their emotional support. They really use you as their psychological support. The heck with a spouse, the heck with a friend, the heck with the world. I'm going to use my child as my therapist, as my financial consultant, as my supportive ear, you know, as my emotional system, support system. That is a problem. This was an extraordinarily long video, guys. I apologize for that. I do encourage you to give it a thumbs up if it was helpful, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us. I hope you had some popcorn while you were watching this, because this video is one of the longest I've ever done. If you found this video helpful, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll do more videos like this every now and then where I will be very comprehensive. So let me know if these kind of videos are helpful to you. All right, guys, I'll see you on Friday with a new video. I'll see you then.